This is adapted from, we've just came out of the high holidays, and this is adapted from one of my more formal presentations. So I hope that you will hear it in the spirit of an exotic kind of cultural expression from outside the otherwise very scriptless TED universe. And now I'm supposed to do this. Most of you, I think, recognize the monumental painting called The Raft of the Medusa by Théodore Géricault, now hanging in the Louvre. With gruesome detail, this painting depicts the final hours of the 15 survivors and many more dead riding a half-submerged, storm-tossed raft off the coast of Western Africa. In the foreground of the painting is a father holding his dead son, his blank face a mask of suffering. In the back, forming a dramatic triangle, a half-naked man desperately waves his ragged shirt at a distant ship, while others around him lift their hands pathetically, pointing and pleading. In his zeal for realism, the painter even exhumed dead bodies from their graves in order to get the shapes and colors of the floating dead just right. Unveiled in strife-torn France in 1819, the raft became a heady symbol of the dangerous excess and incompetence of monarchy, and an international symbol of the urgent necessity for revolution now, appearing on album and book covers in Europe, Ireland, and South America. In Germany, for example, a 20th century book on socialism dedicated to Che Guevara displays this picture on the front just beneath the title. The story of the Raft of the Medusa is even more dramatic than the painting. The ship Medusa set sail for Senegal in 1817 with the new governor, his family, 100 armed soldiers from all over several countries, and a couple hundred more passengers, including women, children, and businessmen. Due to the extreme incompetence and exuberance of the captain, the Medusa ran aground on the famous and well-mapped Bank of Arguin, some 60 kilometers off the coast of what is now Mauritania. Still, the situation did not need to be so dire. The ship would have easily floated off the shoals if the 16 heavy cannons had just been thrown overboard, but the captain would not permit it for reasons that have appeared somewhat delusional. Instead, he delayed any decisive action until, in a moment of panic, he ordered they abandon ship. Of course, as we learned from the Titanic movie, there would not be enough lifeboats. A makeshift raft was hastily thrown together for some 150 remaining passengers. By the time they were all loaded, the raft sunk so far that water was up around the chests of those on the outer edges. With nothing to hold on to, some passengers simply floated off right away and were gone. The plan was that the 4 lifeboats would tow the raft the 60 kilometers to the African shore. However, headway on the roughening seas was difficult, and supplies were low. The captain and the governor in their lifeboats grew afraid. In a dramatic, horrifying gesture, but recounted by one of the raft's 15 survivors, the tow lines were severed with a single blow of the axe. Just like that. The helpless raft was set adrift, while the boats rowed to relative safely on the invisible shore. Back on the raft, no one knew they were going to be set adrift, and no one was meaningfully in charge. With no enforceable command or communication structure, the first night a fight broke out in the utter darkness between armed sailors and soldiers. In the morning, the raft was 60 people lighter. Through the next few days, the scene would deteriorate further to include the tossing of the weak and sick overboard and cannibalism. In the end, only 15 souls would remain. Half of these would die within a week of their rescue. Now, I know any one of you could say with good reason This is a great story, Rabbi, though a little gruesome. I don't see why we are listening to it this afternoon. Allow me to explain. The answer strikes at the very nature of our relationship to everyone else, both here today and not here today, people known to us, and especially those people who are not known to us. You see, I think the story of the Medusa shows us that we all have fundamental commitments and obligations to everyone else around us. By the mere fact of being human and in relationship, by having family and friends and community, by the fundamental interconnectedness, we have entered into a mutual vow or obligation, for example, to not endanger anyone else's life with our own hubris and incompetence. This is one of the ways we fulfill our basic obligation of being human. A basic obligation of being human is not to be the captain of any Medusa, Titanic, or Donner Party, by which I do not mean that we need to promise to never have disasters. That would be absurd. We will always have disasters. That is the nature of human existence. What we need to promise one another is that we will do our utmost to not cause any disasters or make any disaster worse through pride or short-sightedness or a desire to look cool or to wave at pretty girls on the shore. I believe a fundamental core of living in society is that we adults who are in charge of our own ships with others riding in them, we are obligated to be mature adults and to steer those ships carefully to, as my personal hero Johnny Cash used to sing, walk the line. If we have character flaws, such as pride or greed or jealousy, or we just like to show off, we are required to keep all of that rubbish in check, to address those flaws with struggle and growth before they ruin somebody else's life. If we have addictions, we are obliged to get help and deal with them before they shipwreck our lives and the lives of everyone around us. The sin of hubris sunk the Medusa and the Titanic and countless other ships, expeditions, safaris, businesses, and some marriages. The Medusa was also sunk by what we might call sin, or if you have another word, you can tell me another word to use, of incompetence. It may sound sin to come down on incompetence. Not everyone has the same skill set and abilities or equal access to education and training. I think our basic obligation to do no harm, however, requires that we know and respect the boundaries of our abilities. Various professions mandate years of specialized education, bar exams, licensing, before an individual can practice that profession. A primary reason for this is to ensure competence. To practice without education and exams and licensing is rightfully against the law. Where there is no agency or legislation to assure that we be competent, or the appropriate agency has failed to do so properly, we're obliged to monitor ourselves. In the case of the captain of the Medusa, everyone failed. The one who made him a captain, as well as the company who gave him a ship. In the language of Yom Kippur, for which, you can take it or leave it today, everyone sinned through the violation of a public trust. If the circumstances of our lives require skills or knowledge that we do not have, we are obliged to seek that learning before harm is done to others. That may sound like a lot, but imagine these common everyday tasks performed without proper know-how. Driving a boat, driving a car with a boat in tow, rewiring your own home, burning leaves, or caring for a baby. In each case, the hubris and incompetence of proceeding without skill and info is reckless, life-endangering, and in my book, in the language of my profession, a sin. Admitting that we need more information and ability than we now have requires honesty and humility. Both honesty and humility are among the virtues we try to cultivate. Both of these, honesty and humility, contribute to and are an integral part of that grown-up personality that preserves life instead of harming it. Let me put it another way. In this light, the cultivation of honesty and humility can be considered a sort of basic training for the possible life and death struggle of our human existence. Sometimes life isn't like that, but we all know all too well from within our own family circles to the fullest sphere of world history, sometimes it is exactly like this, life and death. And regardless, every day brings us a little closer to one or the other, whether by car wreck or by shipwreck. The fabric of life is everywhere worn and nearly torn. Hubris and incompetence were not the only failings of the Medusa's captain. He also failed to set the appropriate priorities. Without the right priorities, all decision-making becomes skewed. The priority of any captain should be the life and welfare of all the passengers. This was clearly not the captain's top priorities. He chose a route that was dangerous, that no other ship would take, in order to save time. When the ship ran aground, he would not free it by dumping the heavy canyons for reasons we don't know. He abandoned 150 people on a raft to almost certain death because they were not as important as his own life or the governor's. If his priority had been the rescuing of all 400 passengers, then the above decisions would not have even been on the table. Holding the wrong priorities can result in life and death level mistakes. Having the right priorities and the capacity to hold them even under duress, now both of those are learned abilities. This kind of character isn't honed overnight. Being able to choose right priorities and make decisions according to them is a matter of practice and repetition and strength. I'm here to say that our fundamental humanity, our interrelatedness to each other, requires that each of us undergo that training, the creation of right priorities, how to know them, how to hold them, and how to make good decisions by the light of them. There is something else which the captain of the Medusa very notably lacked. Whether for family or for financial issues, legal, medical, or logistical, a big part of human life and death involves intensive problem solving. Historical accounts of the wreck of the Medusa all comment on the remarkable lack of thought put into his decisions. For example, did he consider the possibility that the ship might not sink, but sit merely trapped on the sand? Because that's what ultimately happened. As the lifeboats rowed away and the raft slowly sank and everybody killed everybody else, the ship remained fully intact on the sandbar until it was found by another ship 2 months later, and the handful of very smart sailors who had hid on board liberated. By all accounts, his lack of maturity and experience, appropriate priorities, and basic human compassion prevented him from taking the time and energy necessary for this kind of serious problem solving that could have saved the lives of probably everybody. While it is not terrible to be unable to solve a problem, I believe in such matters of life and death, it is terrible not openly and exhaustively explore every possibility. And many times, such careful and exhaustive problem solving requires, wait for it, working with other people. This means setting aside pride, habit, and a tiny bit of personal space in order to cooperate with others for a greater good. I want to make it clear, my purpose here is not to comment on any upcoming elections. But rather, I would like to leave us here today with what, in my profession, would be called a prayer. In this company, I will voice it as a blessing or a hope. May each and every one of us leave this auditorium more ready to support and preserve life than end it. May we be the captains and sailors that know our jobs and do not abandon our responsibilities. Let us ready ourselves, watch the sky and check the tide, for we are a ship at sea, And know it or not, we do sail together.